I'm ready to go. I've got my notes, I've got my book, I've got my little drinky drink.
Excellent, excellent. I have all of those things sans drinky drink. I just have a little bottle of water that I don't even know where it came from because we don't buy bottled water. But I think my spouse's workplace has water bottles available. So sometimes they just appear in my room and then I steal them.
So, hi, listeners. Welcome back to The Fandom Apprentice, the podcast where two nerdy friends are going through Lord of the Rings. Uh, for me, it's a revisit, and for Sam, it's a brand new experience.
Hmm. I'm Sam, by the way. The other one is Ryn.
And I'm Ryn. And today we're talking about the very beginning of Fellowship of the Ring.
I'm so excited.
Right? And we for the record, we read The Hobbit together.
Hmm.
I read it
Specifically,
to you over
yes.
the phone.
And it was extremely sweet and very, very special. And then you gave me the copy of The Hobbit that we had read together. You snuck it into my bag when I was leaving your apartment. And then I got home and I saw it and I read the little note you put in there and I cried. And then I was rereading the beginning of Lord of the Rings. And then I cried some more because of all the big feelings. It's great. Very excited. And this one, actually, when we had finished The Hobbit and we had finished crying about that, the end of that edition also had the first chapter of Fellowship at the end. So you also read that one to me. And we'll get to
Right.
recounting that specifically when we get to it in the book.
Yeah. So I think we just jump right into it. We're sort of greeted very out of the open with the prologue. You have, the note on the text talking about how this was not meant to be a trilogy. It's one story. But Tolkien was told by his editors it was going to be way too long. So split it up into 6 books, and each of the two of the books each are in a volume. And so volume 1 of The Lord of the Rings is, of course, The Fellowship of the Ring.
They did have when I was in Barnes and Noble looking for a physical copy of the book to get, they did have some that were all of the books together. And I considered it because I really liked the idea of a giant, hefty tome, but that's just too big. It's hard to carry. As Ryn is
As
holding up
I
their
hold up
copy.
my giant, hefty tome given to me by my father, uh, not unlike Bilbo gives Frodo the ring. Ayo, anyway, um, we have our prologue where we're introduced to hobbits and the events of The Hobbit. Um, Tolkien walks us through very roughly what happened in The Hobbit. And we realize this is about to be a much different and much longer story than the children's bedtime story that The Hobbit was.
Mm-hmm.
This is a novel about war and about loss and about epic adventures. It is not something you're telling around the fire to your little children, which The Hobbit was. Um, and I think too, it doesn't necessarily it makes the assumption, or the book doesn't make the assumption rather, that you've read The Hobbit.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need it. I think it helps the reader to have read The Hobbit, but you don't need to have read The Hobbit to enjoy what Lord of the Rings presents out the gate.
Yeah, from what very little I have read of it so far, The Hobbit is nice. It's context, but it seems like what we are getting into is something that's much grander than that. So it's just sort of a nice little, oh, if you've read it, you've spent some time in the world, that's fine. But you would be perfectly fine without it. But also, it's a short book. Everyone should just go read it.
It's a short book, and I think it does add so much to the reading of Lord of the Rings.
Hmm.
Like, particularly literally on page one, where we get chapter one, A Long Expected Party, right?
Stabbed in the heart. Yes.
Which just harkens back to chapter one of The Hobbit, in Unexpected Party. Perfect, beautiful, amazing. I love it
Hmm.
so much. And I just want to get on the record that I love hobbits. I
I think
adore
that is
them.
good to have on the record.
I think I would make a very good hobbit.
Oh, you absolutely would. Yes. You have all of the
I'm
Hobbit values and skills. You'd be a great Hobbit.
I yeah, I think I'm a little tall, but besides the little tallness, like I value food and drink, and I'm a little round in the middle, and my feet aren't particularly hairy, but we can work on that. Uh, and I'm a massive homebody. It's great.
Yeah.
I'd make a wonderful hobbit.
You
I
like
love gossip and
adventures,
shit.
but you gear up to go on an adventure and you have your adventure and then you like to come home and reflect on the adventure. So you're
Right.
maybe
I make sure that I
more of
always
a Turkish
have
Hobbit.
right. I always have my hat and my coat and my pocket handkerchief when I go on any adventures.
I actually have one of your pocket handkerchiefs that I forgot to give back to you after our most recent adventure together. So I'm hanging on to it for a little bit.
Sounds great. Um I love just the early exposition
Hmm.
that we have. Um I love within the first few pages that we get old men sitting around and gossiping, and that is our exposition. Um
Yeah.
and also Gaffer Gamgee being described as the preeminent expert on vegetables and the growth of potatoes. I want to be the preeminent expert on the growth of potatoes for my village. That needs to be my epithet scrawled on my tombstone.
Yeah, I think we can make
Here
that happen.
lies Catherine. She was an expert on potatoes.
It's just all of the description that we get in the beginning just feels so lush. There's so much about the world that's so immersive that we just get right away. And then it just sort of only increases as we get to like the party later on. But I feel very much like there's a strong sense of place.
Right. The Shire is well defined for us, and we learn even before we encounter Bilbo as a speaking character, we learn everything we need to know about who Bilbo Baggins is.
Hmm.
Bilbo Baggins is, for the record, a gay man.
Absolutely, yes. As is his nephew. We will get to that. There's too much for me to, even just in the small bit that I've seen, there's too much for me to keep a running tally of every single gay thing that is said or done, but we'll pick out the highlights because yes, this is absolutely a gay man enjoying his eccentric retirement. His reputation in town might have taken a bit of a hit because he went on a big adventure, but everyone is just talking about how queer he is all the time.
He's so queer. I would like to call out the irony of a hobbit named Daddy Twofoot
I
calling people
did.
queer as if that's a
Yes.
marvel.
That
Sir, your
stuck
name is
out to me.
Daddy.
Yeah.
Your name is Daddy, sir. You don't get to talk.
Mm-mm.
But it sounds very, very right out of the bat like Frodo, who we are also introduced to as Bilbo's heir and younger cousin and his adopted heir. Um, it sounds very much like Frodo grew up in a queer commune on the
Mhm.
other side of the river in Brandybuck or in Buckland with his Brandybuck relatives, and then came to live with his eccentric gunkle.
And that's beautiful. That's a lifestyle that we can all aspire to.
That's incredible. If you listen to the old dudes gossiping, Frodo went from queer to queerer.
Hmm.
Um, and where's the line? What is it? Oh, someone, one of the old men says to the gaffer, you can say what you like, gaffer, but the Bag End's a queer place and its folk are queerer. And gaffer, has his retort, if that's being queer, then we could do with a bit more queerness in these parts. I certainly think we could do with a bit more queerness in these parts.
Absolutely.
Um, and then what happens, Sam? Oh,
So
we're introduced to our Sam. We're introduced to Book Sam.
yes, Book Sam. We'll have to distinguish. I love Book Sam. He's a treasure. He's a gift. He's a gem. Um, do we meet him before the party happens? It has been a hot minute since I have read this in detail closely. I was just kind of skimming it before we started.
No, we just sort of get um, Gaffer just sort of comments on his son Sam, but I
Hmm.
don't want to skip over the introduction of Gandalf,
Hmm.
which happens directly after Old Men Exposition, because I would like to introduce to our listeners the Fandom Apprentice laws of fantasy.
Oh yes, this is very important. Please.
This is very, very important. Um, and we'll define more laws of fantasy mostly as they occur to us. But I would like to introduce here in episode 1, in chapter 1, the Fandom Apprentice's first law of fantasy, which is that magic makes you dramatic.
It absolutely does. And the more magical you are, the more dramatic you are. We see this with Gandalf.
I
Was there
do have
anything?
actually later on Catherine's first corollary, which
Oh,
is that the degree of drama exuded by a being is directly correlated with the level of magic that they have access to.
we're going to need to graph this. Maybe when we're done with this book so that we can have seen all the characters, but we need to have, maybe we'll put it on the Instagram or something or tweet it. I don't know. You do our social media, you can decide. But just a graph, we can see like little pictures of all of their faces where they fall along the ranking. I think that's very important.
Right. And so we get our introduction of Gandalf, and Gandalf the Wandering Wizard. We learn this man is dramatic, and this man is known for being dramatic, and he is known for putting on an incredible show, mostly with fireworks.
Hmm.
Um, but he's also known for, or it mentions too that he has more difficult and dangerous business here than just his fireworks, but the hobbits don't know anything about it.
Hmm.
Um, Gandalf is not just dramatic, Gandalf is the agent of the plot.
Yeah.
And we'll see that constantly. Gandalf serves to just forward the plot and provide exposition where needed. Um, he is the Maiar ex machina, um, for a little fun pun for those of us who have read the Silmarillion. um,
I will just let that go right over my head and then appreciate it later. But in terms of him furthering the plot, I mean, we get a nice little moment where there's some little children who are running up to him and, remarking on all his fireworks and stuff. And then he has a random cryptic conversation with Bilbo about his vague plans. And Gandalf's like, "You mean to go on with your plan then? Like, what's the plan? What's the fucking plan? We're gonna find out what the plan is." But there's just a brief mention of the mysterious plan, and then off to birthday party shenanigans.
right, and we just so much, so much birthday shenanigans. This sounds like an incredible, wonderful party by an eccentric old rich gay man who just he can afford to show up everyone else who thinks that he's a little bit weird, a little bit queer. I love the no admittance except on party business sign that goes up.
Hmm.
My brother had one of those signs specifically taken from the movie on his bedroom door from the time that we were, God, very, very small.
Yeah.
Um,
And for clarity, do Bilbo and Frodo have the same birthday, or are their birthdays just close together and they celebrate them at the same time?
They have the same birthday.
Okay, yes. That is what I thought. Just
Um,
making sure so I didn't make a fool of myself.
yes, Bilbo is turning at this time 111 years old, which is mentioned as like not impossible for a hobbit, but very respectable.
Mhm.
And Frodo is coming of age. He is turning 33. Um, and it's mentioned earlier in the book that like Frodo comes to live with Bilbo at when Bilbo's 99, and doing some quick math, then Frodo was 21 at the
Mhm.
time, in his tweens, his irresponsible 20s. Um, and we get the description of the party. What is it? Bilbo Baggins called it a party, but it was really a variety of entertainments rolled into one.
'Cause there's songs, dances, music, games, and of course, food and drink, the official meals and unofficial meals. And apparently, hobbits give other people presents on their birthdays. So there's presents, magical and non magical, for everybody. I think it mentions some people leaving the party and coming back in to get a second present.
Which is glorious. And Gandalf then sets off his fireworks, which are all said to be, they were all superb. The art of Gandalf improved with age. And this is not mentioned, but Gandalf is well over like 3,000 years old at this point. So, improved with age, this is not just a fine wine. This is the archaeological find of the century. um, he he's got his big magical fireworks, fountains of butterflies, pillars of flame that rose and turned into eagles or sailing ships, or a phalanx of flying swans, which I don't necessarily know if that's like a term that you use for flying swans, but my immediate thought with the word phalanx was the Greek spear formation. So I
Hmm.
just immediately thought of a bunch of swans holding spears
Oh, I
and
was thinking of
flying through the air.
their long necks and their pointy beaks as being spear,
I
and the swans just
suppose,
coming at you to attack you, which is something that swans would totally do.
yeah, I was just, if you handed a swan a weapon, I was just terrified by that possibility because swans might look beautiful, but they are evil incarnate.
Also, they don't look that beautiful up close. If you ever get a real good look at a swan up close, they're kind of weird, scary looking birds. I'm
And
not
their
for
teeth,
swans.
um,
But back to fireworks.
back to fireworks, which end, of course, with one final firework, which is clearly a reference to Smog, the dragon from The Hobbit.
And it scares the absolute shit out of every single person at the party. It goes from, oh, nice, swans and butterflies, to it's flying over people's heads and people are hitting the ground because they're terrified of it. And it ends with a deafening explosion. Um,
Yeah,
it's a
a
real turn in
giant
the mood.
magical dragon. A magical dragon. And then Bilbo just goes, and that's the signal for supper. Like nothing has happened because this is a guy who has stared into the eyes of a dragon, stolen a cup from him, and lived.
Hmm.
Um, and they they then have supper, and there's also a small family supper, family dinner party, which the invitations to this one are limited to 12 dozen, one gross, it says, which is an actual term for 144 people or 144 items, a dozen,
Hmm.
which comes from the French gros douzaine, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong,
That's
which
close enough.
just means a large dozen.
Hmm.
Um, but it comes from a base 12 counting system, which if you look at your fingers and you use the thumb to point, you have 12 sections of your other four fingers total.
I guess I had never thought about it that way, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So that allows you to, a duodecimal or a base 12 counting system is used in a lot of like ancient languages
Mm-hmm.
and remains in English with, 12 hours in a day and a dozen being features of our language.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just think it's very cool. It allows you to count up to 12 on one hand. It allows you to count up to 24 very easily by just using your thumb and your fingers, um, as opposed to our base 10 using one finger for one thing. And, if you're just all of your fingers and toes is just 20.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Anyway, that was our brief sojourn into bits of math and uh, and linguistic history.
Included in this
So
gross is, unfortunately, the Sackville Bagginses. Boo.
this is an
Apparently,
anti-Sackville Baggins podcast.
as all podcasts should be, fuck the Sackville Bagginses. Apparently, they, quote, disliked Bilbo and detested Frodo, which, side note, I don't know what Frodo ever did to anyone. He seems just like a very sweet, harmless, inoffensive young man. But so magnificent was the invitation card written in golden ink that they felt it was impossible to refuse. They are just the shallowest, worst people, and they get shallower and they get worse before our little section is out. I don't know if it's in this chapter or the next one, but just fuck them. They're
I
awful.
also have to say, golden ink is the worst color for ink. Assuming paper even close to white,
Mm.
like even if it's like a yellowy, like older type paper, you can't. That's not going to show up particularly well. You're going to have to squint.
Yeah, that's not good contrast. If you're in a dimly lit hobbit hole, how are you reading these invitations?
It is mentioned though that the the hobbit hole that hobbit holes are a feature of sort of very rich and very poor hobbits specifically.
True, true, true.
So, the Sackville Bagginses would love to be in a hobbit hole, but probably are not at the moment.
Not at the moment, anyway.
Not at the fucking moment. But we get I do love that we get a little more of like Tolkien editorializing in this book than we got in The Hobbit. So we
Mhm.
get and we get Tolkien editorializing on behalf of all of the other characters. So we get a line about Bilbo that they're dreading Bilbo's after dinner speech, which is inevitable because he was liable to drag in bits of what he called poetry, and sometimes after a glass or two would allude to the absurd adventures of his mysterious journey. Um, I love that just liable to drag in bits of what he called poetry.
Yeah.
Stone fucking cold. So mean.
It's like, listen, he wrote his memoirs. He's having fun being eccentric, but it does just annoy the fuck out of everyone around him. And I love that.
I this reminds me a little bit of the very early parts of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where they're describing Vogan poetry being the third worst in the universe. And I was
Mm.
reading this line thinking, oh, so where does Bilbo's poetry rank
Oh, no.
amongst universe levels of poetry?
Probably still quite bad. And in
Well,
terms of the speech that he gives, this speech was
this
also delivered to me in a very dramatic way. Would you like to tell the good
I
people the complete context? Because it was
do I
beautiful and
have
wonderful.
to?
Yes, because if you don't, I will.
It was also the first time that you had met my roommate.
Yes, they were
And
recovering from a minor medical procedure and, like, kind of out of it, and what I
but
have been
it
told is
was
oh, sorry.
we were just sort of all sitting around, and my roommate had moved in like the week prior to this,
Mhm.
and so did not really know me. Just comes out of their room, and I am standing on a chair delivering this speech. um, my dear Bagginses and Boffins, Tooks and Brandybucks and Grubs and Chubs, and Um, it's a wonderful, wonderful speech.
And specifically, it was the transition because we were sitting on the couch together, being cozy, having our nice little moment. And then you're like, wait 1 second, and get up on the chair. And it was delightful.
Um, yes, and he has one hand in his trouser pocket.
Hmm.
So I did stand on the chair with one hand in the pocket of my shorts. Um, and uh, they we have the speech, and I love the way that this speech is written and printed with the different capitalizations and uh, the the use of the italics here and there. Like, I feel like I understand Bilbo's tone and what he's emphasizing really well.
Hmm.
I don't know. I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was well done.
Yeah, no, it adds a lot of dimension. And especially if you have read The Hobbit, seeing the confidence with which he carries himself at this point in his life. We have an inside joke from our D&D campaign about the idea of someone being a fully realized woman, and I have taken that on as my personal brand. But this is definitely a fully realized hobbit. This is someone who knows what he's about, has, as you said, stared a dragon in the face and come out alive. So he is out of fucks to give. He's just going to do what he wants.
Oh yeah. Um People get pissed off that he calls them a gross.
Yeah.
Um
And that he refers to the proud foots, and then somebody in the crowd goes, "Proud feet."
I mean, I guess if that's how you're going to pluralize your last name, like, that's fine.
Yeah.
Um but and here we've already had Gandalf demonstrate that he's dramatic with the dragon. But here we have again a demonstration of the first law, that magic
Mhm.
makes you dramatic, because Bilbo disappears and there is a blinding flash of light and Bilbo is nowhere to be seen. Um he just he tells them all, this is the end, I'm leaving, goodbye, and disappears.
Mhm.
Um and Frodo is just like, yeah, I knew this one was coming. um and he did. He had been in the know. And it says, he felt deeply troubled. He suddenly realized that he loved the old hobbit dearly. I love this. Like, I know they are family, but I love the chosen family aspect of this immediately.
Yeah.
Of just this older gay mentor to this younger gay mentor, or to this younger gay mentee.
And I know we were saying at the outset that you don't have to have read The Hobbit, and I don't want to keep referencing it too much, but if you are someone who has read The Hobbit, then you have also come to love Bilbo, and realizing that we're going to go on a new adventure without him, or with him being in a very minor role, it's a little bit sad. And so we get to, sort of share that with Frodo.
It is. We get Bilbo sort of wrapping up his affairs in his hobbit hole, and then Gandalf's there, and Gandalf is the plot. Just delivers some plot, and of course tells Bilbo, basically he added the flash of light and the smoke, um, because it wasn't dramatic enough. Basically, people would have wondered. And this is where I was going to initially, before you said something earlier. Thank you, brain cell, living inside my brain. I was going to introduce the first corollary, which is that the drama is directly correlated to magical power.
Hmm.
Bilbo has access to a magical item that we will learn more about very shortly, and that we know is a powerful magical item. But Gandalf is a wizard, and though we don't necessarily know it at this point, and you don't learn it in Lord of the Rings, he is essentially an angel sent to Middle Earth to meddle in affairs.
Hmm. And he is just everything he does operates on a level that is so far above everyone else in the story that most of the things he does when it comes to interacting with the regular characters are just sort of child's play to him. So, yeah, sure, I'll make a giant explosion, I'll make a flash. He is the even older gay mentor. So, we have our three generations of magical, dramatic gay men. So, who's above him? Who's above Gandalf? I don't know.
Iluvatar? God, wait, who's Gandalf's Valar? I don't remember off the top of my head, the Anir. Anyway, we'll get to that maybe at some point.
Yeah. In my head, I'm just like, I'm spinning like a ballerina. Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
And you won't. That's okay.
One day, one day.
Um, one day. But we get Gandalf and Bilbo talking about whether or not he's going to take the ring with him. And finally, Bilbo says, yep, we could. This is fine. I will leave the ring after some debate. Um, and he and a bunch of dwarves who are just there, three dwarves, unnamed dwarves, are just they just go off into the night sky. I don't
They
want to
go
skip
off
over
into the
the line
night.
from
They do not
earlier.
go off into the night sky. They don't fly away.
That's fair. I do want to talk about one of the lines earlier, um, which is, you know, the I'm old, Gandalf. I don't look it, but I'm beginning to feel it in my heart of hearts. I feel stretched. Um, and then the bit that really spoke to me is somebody who lives in a big city and misses the outdoors every now and then. Um, I want to see mountains again, Gandalf. Mountains. And then find somewhere to rest.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, dear listener, I'm in my mid 20s. Like, in some ways, I should not be feeling as tired as I do on the daily. In other ways, we all lived through a very interesting little global catastrophe in the last few years. um, that as a biologist, I had the interesting experience of working on the front lines of.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I'm feeling those years sometimes, even though there's not that many of them. I have to think if there happen to be 111 of them, including some very traumatic periods of my life, I'd start to feel them no matter how chipper and cheerful I was on the daily.
Yeah.
And there is something magical about being in the mountains that, I love living by the coast and uh, enjoy the harbor that I can walk along every now and then, but there is something magical about the mountains.
We did recently go on our own little journey to the mountains, and it was very fun seeing your reaction to them. Obviously, I enjoyed them tremendously, but I was driving, so I couldn't really take in the full views. But my joy of seeing the mountains, coupled with getting to watch your reaction to the mountains, that was golden. That was perfect.
Thank you. Um, but going on from there, Bilbo leaves into the night, um, and we get the poem that we got at the end of The Hobbit, but this is a slightly different verse. It's a new verse. And so this, I guess, is where I will rate Bilbo's poetry as pretty great.
Yeah, this is a good
Because
one.
the Road poem is probably my favorite one of Tolkien's poems or songs. And some of that has to do with Glenn Yarborough's singing in the 1977 animated Hobbit from Rankin and Bass. Roads go ever, ever on. But where he just Bilbo leaves and sings softly into the dark. The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can, pursuing it with eager feet till it joins some larger way, where many paths and errands meet. Whither then? I cannot say. He paused, silent for a moment. Then, without another word, he turned away from the lights and voices in the fields and tents, and, followed by his three companions, went round into his garden and trotted down the long sloping path. And then Gandalf stares after him and says, "Goodbye, my dear Bilbo, until our next meeting." Frodo comes in and he, helps. He tells Frodo, Bilbo's gone, but he'll be all right. He left a package for you, and here's his will, and also his ring. Frodo is a little bit surprised, but he takes it, and Gandalf goes, "Yep, that's it. I'm going to bed. Keep it secret. Keep it safe. I'm going to bed." This is the gay grandfather.
Yeah.
I do love the gift giving that Bilbo does, and how all of the notes he writes are fucking stone cold.
Yeah, I was gonna say gift is a really strong word for it. He leaves some, I would call it passive aggressive prop comedy. I would say more than gifts, because
That is absolutely what he does.
he's parting with some of his worldly possessions that he doesn't need, and every little thing that he's left behind includes a note to some person about why the thing he's leaving them will be useful to them. Um, for
For
Alderard took for
Adelard
his
took
for his
very own.
from Bilbo an umbrella. Adelard had carried off many unlabeled ones. So, it's this guy steals all my fucking umbrellas. Or there's somebody who he leaves a wastebasket to in honor of their long correspondence. It's just all stuff like that.
Milo never from Milo Burrows, hoping it will be useful, from BB on a gold pen and ink bottle. Milo never answered letters.
And for
um,
Lobelia Sackville Baggins.
as a present on a case of silver spoons. Bilbo believed she'd acquired a good many of his spoons while he was away on his farmer journey. Lobelia knew that quite well. When she arrived later in the day, she took the point at once, but she also took the spoons. It's so perfect. Every one of the various parting gifts had labels written out personally by Bilbo, and several had some point or some joke. But of course, most of the things were given where they would be wanted and welcome. The poorer hobbits, and especially those of Bagshot Row, did very well. I just appreciate that, like, Bilbo clearly pays attention to the people around him.
Mm-hmm.
He was very much changed by that little journey that he took to the Lonely Mountain.
Yeah.
And the Bilbo that we see at the beginning of The Hobbit and the Bilbo that we are encountering now at the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring are not the same Hobbit. They are, of course, 60 years apart from each other. So there's also that. Age has something to do with it. But, you have the gardener Gaffer Gamgee getting 2 sacks of potatoes, a new spade, a woolen waistcoat, and a bottle of ointment for creaking joints. Old Rory Brandybuck, in return for much hospitality, got a dozen bottles of Old Wynyard's strong red wine from the South Farthing, and now quite mature, as it had been laid down by Bilbo's father. Rory forgave Bilbo and voted him a capital fellow after the first bottle. I feel like if you have an entire bottle of very fine wine just to yourself, I would vote a lot of people a capital fellow after if they had given me that bottle.
Yeah.
Poor Frodo is dealing with a lot.
Yeah, because not only is he processing this big change in his life and being responsible for this property and everything that goes with it, he's also trying to cope, but then, dealing out his uncle's jokes to all these people like, haha, here's this funny haha. Also, fuck you, Lobelia. Also, yeah, I'm totally doing great with all of this. Thank you so much for coming to the party. Okay, bye. He's got a lot to process.
Yeah. The Sackville Bagginses leave with a final moment of dickery, telling Frodo basically that he's he's not even a real Baggins. Um, and uh, storming out. But Frodo is just sort of like, well, that's it. That's all we're gonna deal with for now.
And we also get just a little one little line at the end of the distribution of gifts about how, there's gives away a bunch of stuff, but there's plenty of everything left for Frodo. There was, however, no sign nor mention of money or jewelry. Not a penny piece or a glass bead was given away. And that is kind of unclear to me if there's no sign of money or jewelry in the house, or there is some, but it's not being distributed to people. But regardless, I think after his experience with Smog, I could understand Bilbo having an aversion to keeping a lot of stuff like that around. I could
He
understand it
keeps
feeling
things
distasteful.
well, and I think, there's a little bit of like the line in The Hobbit is, and all that wealth is undoubtedly what brought the dragon.
Hmm.
And so Frodo and at the end of The Hobbit, we get one of my favorite lines being, if more of us valued food and cheer above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world. And so Bilbo clearly has value for nice things and good food and good drink, but he's not, hiding gold coins away.
Hmm.
He is keeping things that are of value to him and of value to people like him.
Hmm.
Again, just for a little bit here at the end of this chapter, we get Gandalf being dramatic again and knocking on the door. If you don't let me in, Frodo, I shall blow your door right down your hole and out through the hill, he said. um Perfect. Frodo, come in, come in. I thought it was Lobelia. Okay, then I forgive you. Oh, I I love these two. I
Yeah.
love Frodo. I think he's just such a lovely character, and I'm very excited to go on an adventure with him. He clearly has inherited some of Bilbo's restlessness because he's telling Frodo like, or he's telling Gandalf like, I also kind of want to go. I want to see things. I'd like to travel with Bilbo.
Yeah.
Let's go. And Gandalf's like, calm down,
Hmm.
hang on. You're 33. You'll get there. Bilbo was 51 when he went to, or 50 and 51 when he went to the Lonely Mountain. Wait a minute.
And isn't that kind of nice as the people who are in our mid to late 20s to think of, you're 33. You've got plenty of time. That's nice. Because I think
That
there
is
is this
nice.
kind of feeling that if you haven't perfectly figured out your entire life by the time you're like 27, someone will personally come to your house with a gun and just be like, well, you didn't do it correctly. Like, it's
Well,
this
this
like
is
very
America, so
true. But, there's this like feeling that there's some kind of deadline that we are all trying to meet constantly. And so it's nice to see someone
right.
in fiction be like, "Hey, actually you're good."
There is no deadline. There is no, and I've been coming to terms with this a little bit, and reading this book is helpful almost with that. Just there's no deadline. There is no need to follow an exact plan. You can never tell when something like a 3-year long global pandemic will just come out of the woodwork and knee you right in the nose and uh, say, fuck you, Buster.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know where that phrasing came from. Anyway,
I like it.
uh,
I think it's good.
well, fuck you, Buster is now an official slogan of Phantom Apprentice. Moving on to chapter 2.
I'll embroider that on a pillow. It'll be beautiful.
Fuck you, Buster.
It'll go right
Uh,
next to your other embroidered pillow that is also about fucking that I made for you. So really, I think we're just developing a theme for your home decor.
I will point out in my home decor there are several other bits that are about that.
This is an aside that we can edit out later if we want, but I did just love when I was walking around Redacted Town Center the other day, and there was this store, this cutesy little art store with all these stained glass pieces in the windows, and one of them was just straight up depicting two people fucking. And it was delightful, and if it wasn't, I didn't go in the store, but I imagine it's probably like $300 because I just imagine all stained glass is incredibly expensive. But if it was affordable, I'd be like, this would be perfect for your roommate. You could hang it up in your home. They would love it.
I would absolutely hang that up in my home. My home features, and fully down keeping this in. I like tangents. If you too like tangents, you should continue listening, and also tell your friends about this, because word of mouth is the best way for a podcast to spread.
Yeah.
Um, but my home decor includes a a painting of the lovers tarot card, but the lovers are T for T.
Hmm.
Um, my home decor includes a hammer and sickle print, except the hammer part of the hammer and sickle is a magic wand, um, of the Hitachi variety, um, and a a bunch of fruit that looks suspiciously yonic,
And
amongst
that's
some other
wonderful.
things. There's definitely other things around,
Yeah.
and that's
You've
perfect.
curated a lovely energy that is welcoming and comforting and delightful to the right kind of person and would probably be terrifying to the wrong kind of person. It will separate the wheat from the chaff, as I am fond of saying. And as I recently was reminded that saying separating the wheat from the chaff is like a very like religious thing to say, and that's not just a normal phrase that everyone uses all the time. It's a holdover from being a pastor's kid. I just thought it was a normal thing that people said, but no, that's again like your lovely
Apparently
roommate
not.
is fond of saying, you are blessed and highly favored. I love that. Um, so my thing is
Oh,
separating the wheat from the chaff. It's a useful phrase.
that's fair. I love the way that it. Yes, I think the home would be most welcoming to people like Bilbo, and
Hmm.
most terrifying to people like the Sackville Bagginses. To
Good.
draw it back, um, into chapter two, the Shadow of the Past,
Okay.
in which, I guess before we go on, Gandalf does tell Frodo, beware the ring, like beware the Ides of March.
Mm.
Um, if you travel, you know, by the nines, stay off the roads. It's the Daedra, you see. Uh, he's an agent of the plot. He is mysterious. Frodo literally says, "You're very mysterious. What are you afraid of?" And Gandalf says, "I don't know, so I'm going to not say anything about it. Too bad. Um, I have to go. Goodbye."
He says
um,
specifically, look out for me, especially at unlikely times. Goodbye.
I love him. He's perfect. I aspire to that level of drama, although that would mean that I need to be that level of magical. So if any fey beings or anyone wants to grant me magical powers, and yeah, that'd be great. Um, we can talk. Anyway, the Shadow of the Past. Frodo's got lots of little wonderful queer friends.
Yeah. And he seems to be enjoying, being the master of Bag End and having his things to do and sharing his home with everybody. It seems like he's having a lovely time.
He lived alone as Bilbo had done, but he had a good many friends, especially among the younger hobbits. Um,
He
and we're
lived
formally in.
alone, confirmed bachelor.
We know he's gay already. Like,
Mhm.
um,
We'll see him interact with his boyfriend soon. They're very sweet.
we will see him interact with his love interest. I don't think we can call them boyfriends yet.
Yeah.
I
Also,
think they might have hooked up once or twice, but
this may be a good time to touch on my Hobbit gender theory, which is that you can't really map binary human genders onto hobbits. I think that their gender is hobbit, and that can encompass, its own range of things. But when I'm thinking about the hobbit characters, I don't think of them as men. It seems like they're their own distinct category. And I
Oh,
don't
and
really
like
have
we will
evidence
distinguish
to.
them.
Oh, we will distinguish them?
We will distinguish them from men, capital M men. Although, obviously Tolkien's writing is doing this as like a distinguishing, like this is distinguishing to basically hobbits from humans, and
Mhm.
he's using men to mean human. But I would see this as distinguishing hobbits from men because we're doing this as a very gay reading
Yes.
with our modern sensibilities. So uh, the 19 in our here in 1974 or when did this come out? Fellowship. I should know this.
You also are
The
holding a copy of the book in your hand, as am I, where it is printed typically. Copyright 1954.
I'm sorry, 20 years prior to when I said it was.
How dare
Um,
you?
I don't know how I'm ever going to live that down, to be honest. I know The Hobbit came out in 1937. That one I do know. Anyway, 1954. Shadow of the Past, as I've now said about 5 times, is chapter 2. We're introduced to Peregrine Took and Meriadoc Brandybuck, usually called Pippin and Merry. And we're going to get a lot with these two. I love them. They're such chaos.
Mhm.
Particularly Pippin. Pippin is just such fucking chaos in a little bottle, and I love him so much.
I haven't spent enough time with them to really tell them apart yet. I just know they're kind of, Merry and Pippin. They're like a little unit, but I enjoy them.
They are. Um, and they know that Frodo is a little bit weird, but they like hanging out with him. Frodo's skincare routine is phenomenal. He continues to look incredibly young and youthful and beautiful, even as he reaches 50.
Hmm. So we get a pretty significant
Um,
time skip from
yeah,
33 to 50.
17 years, a full 17 years from from when Bilbo, or it's not quite a full 17 years yet, um, at this beginning point. But it is at least 10 years. We are approaching 50 here. We're not, we're close to, 14, 15 years here.
Hmm.
Um, and then, we start to see weird things happening, strange happenings in the world outside. Gandalf is not here. Um, and we're hearing things from the dwarves about the enemy and the land of Mordor and the Dark Tower and orcs and trolls and dark happenings far off. Um, and now we have the 17th year. We have one evening in the spring of Frodo's 50th year. So 17 full years after chapter 1 in 2 pages. We talked about The Hobbit moving very quickly when we were reading it, but like this also is just very fast.
Hmm.
It's very efficient. We dwell on things that we need to dwell on, and then anything that is not worth dwelling on, it's gone. We just
Hmm.
we just entirely skip over it. Right? And again, we go back to an inn and we have lots of gossip amongst dudes at the inn.
Hell yeah.
We get bar gossip again as exposition, which is perfect. I love
And
it.
again, calling back to our connection to D&D, the way that all D&D campaigns are legally required to begin is with gossip in a tavern.
Yeah, that's the only way that you can handle things. That is how my last 3 D&D campaigns have begun, both that I was DMing and not.
There's a reason that it works. It's phenomenal.
It is. It's perfect. But we get the end of bar exposition. Um, I think, can we make that another law? Um,
Bar
no,
exposition?
I don't know. I hmm.
Because
I think I'm
that's
gonna have to
just
mull on that.
because the thing about the first law is that you can use it to predict things that will happen. But I don't think that you can necessarily count on any specific instance of lore coming from a bar. You could maybe say that, if there is a bar, then there will be lore, there will be gossip. But I don't know if it's as
I
good of a
think,
rule.
no, I am gonna actually put this in here.
Okay.
We don't encounter too many bars, but I will say, specifically, the Phantom Apprentice's second law is that if there is a bar or an inn, there will be plot.
I like that.
Plot is either expositioned or it is exposed, whatever. The plot moves forward in an inn or a bar.
Mhm.
It doesn't only move forward in an inn or a bar, but if there is a bar, the plot will move forward.
I like it. I support it. This is seconded. This is
And
now
I'm
official.
yes, I'm thinking ahead to uh, some later instances that come up
Ooh, mysterious.
just in Lord of the Rings, um, where this law applies. Anyway, um, but we also do get dramatic wizard exposition now. Um, Gandalf shows back up.
After 9
Looks hard.
years.
9 years since he saw him last, and you know, prior to that, he'd seen him sporadically, like every couple of years.
Mhm.
So over the last 17 years, he's seen Gandalf a handful of times, maybe. Um, Although apparently for 2 years he turned up fairly often, coming unexpectedly and going after dusk and going off without warning before sunrise. He wants to hear about Frodo's health. He's checking in. He's checking in on his gay grandson. He tells Frodo, "You look the same as ever," and Frodo says, "So do you." But secretly he thought that Gandalf looked older and more careworn. Gandalf was thinking of a spring nearly 80 years before, when Bilbo had run out of Bag End without a handkerchief. His hair was perhaps whiter than it had been then, and his beard and eyebrows were perhaps longer, and his face more lined with care and wisdom, but his eyes were as bright as ever, and he smoked and blew smoke rings with the same vigor and delight. And then we get exposition about the rings.
Yeah, okay. So fuck the rings. So this was something that because I had a sense from The Hobbit that the rings were, kind of bad news. But they clearly go in this book from being, oh, interesting plot device, fun magical ring that turns you invisible. Don't hang on to it for a long time or it might corrupt you, but it's probably fine, to, oh no, this is extremely sinister and terrifying and we need to get rid of it as quickly as possible. This is, in this little bit of exposition, I have become extremely fearful of the ring. It is very well done.
Uh-huh, and that is how you're supposed to feel about it.
Yeah, it's just fuck all of this. And it's so detailed. And we learn about Gollum and all of his shit with the ring, and
Well, we
it's
learn about
so
that in a
freaky.
moment, but I don't want to skip over once again our demonstration of the first law,
Yes, yes,
where
please.
Gandalf takes the ring and chucks it into the fire.
Hmm.
And we get the fiery runes, and we read quite a famous line, which is, if you say any of this to any it, these are lines that a lot of people will have heard of, regardless of whether or not they're Tolkien or Lord of the Rings fans. It's one ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them, which are two lines of a verse long known in elven lore. 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. And I love Tolkien's commitment to delivering plot through verse.
Hmm.
I think it's perfect.
Unlike Bilbo's poetry, this is quite good.
Yeah. This is so much more ominous than Bilbo's poetry. This is
Yeah.
more ominous even than, Far Over the Misty Mountains Cold. And it doesn't take 2 pages to do it.
Yeah.
Um, but we get more about the history of the ring, and then, um, as you said, we learn about Smeagol's history with the ring. Smeagol, of course, being Gollum. Uh, we learn that Smeagol was something like a hobbit, and then he killed his boyfriend and took the ring.
Hmm.
And yes, I am asserting that Smeagol is also queer, um, based solely on the line, "Give us that deagle, my love."
Yeah. You know what? I'll take it. And,
Yeah,
queer people can be complex. We do not have to be shining beacons of virtue and respectability. Sometimes we're evil and we steal a ring and then we live in a cave for a bajillion years. This is part of the vastness of the queer experience.
yeah. So, I
And
think
he
if we're going
says,
to have a story,
my love like 3 times. So, yeah.
yeah, I think, and clearly we have, some choking that went awry.
Yeah,
Uh,
this did not seem to be
clearly,
pre-negotiated.
no. I think if we're going to have a story in which there are basically no women, we can assert that everyone's queer.
Yeah, I like that.
Um, Thank you, Tolkien. We appreciate you. And also how absolutely gay you wrote all of your characters, even without intending to
Mhm.
necessarily. Who knows? Uh, we have, yeah, little bits of Frodo saying, do we, uh, he should have, Bilbo should have killed Gollum, and Gandalf is saying, what good would that have done?
Mhm.
What good is violence in the end? Um, Gollum is not evil. Gollum is corrupted. Gollum is sad. Pity him, Frodo. Um, I do have the one other line that I wanted to talk about too, which is Frodo, that Gandalf saying to Frodo, "Our time is beginning to look black. Uh, the enemy is fast becoming strong, and or always after a defeat and a respite, the shadow takes another shape and grows again." And Frodo says, "I wish it need not have happened in my time." Gandalf says, "So do I, and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us." And as we were just discussing, um, Tolkien comes and delivers us a little punch.
Yeah,
Of
I've
just,
seen that one quoted a lot in all of the once in a lifetime, once in a generation events that we have lived through. Yeah, I feel that very deeply.
yeah, a little too many of them. We're working on it. We're getting there. Uh, that one is that one hits home.
Mhm.
Um, and then what happens, Sam?
And
Where are we going
then
from here?
then we get a little bit of comic relief unless there was anything else in the meat of their conversation that you wanted to get to. Um,
No, just Frodo not being able to destroy the ring.
yeah.
But that's, and asking sort of, what do we do? about this.
Yeah, and that's you have to go throw it into a cavern or something. He gives a very specific description.
The
But I
cracks
think
of
that's
doom in the fiery mountain.
yeah, that's one of the other things that everyone knows, even if you are not a Tolkien fan, is that the only way to destroy the ring is you got to throw it in the volcano. So that is, just sort of a common cultural piece of knowledge. But then we get our little bit of comic relief that Sam was eavesdropping the entire time and he is terrified of Gandalf and is like cowering behind Frodo, like, oh, he's going to turn me into something unnatural. And Gandalf is pissed that Sam was eavesdropping. And so he tries to punish him by sending him away on the adventure. And he's going, well, I won't turn you into something. I'll do something worse. You have to go on the adventure. And then Sam, perfect, perfect creature, says, me, sir, cried Sam, springing up like a dog invited for a walk. Me, go and see elves and all. Hooray, he shouted, and then burst into tears.
This
I
poor
love
man.
him. I love him so much.
Samwise Gamgee is one of the best characters in pretty much anything ever.
Yeah.
Um, and I love him so dearly. I think
And
every Tolkien reader uh, with a heart does.
I'm sure, just because of the way that books work, that something terrible and heartbreaking is going to happen to him at some point. And I'm not ready for that. And so I am just going to put off thinking about it for as long as possible because I just want him to be happy.
I am going to not say anything
Thank you.
uh, because this is a story about this is a podcast about you experiencing this for the first time as much as you can,
I think I have
and me
some kind of
enjoying it.
inkling of like just vague notes of like he has some sort of struggle in the future, but I don't know enough about it for it to be like really substantive. But for now,
Well,
Sam's just gonna go on a nice little trip with his boyfriend, and that's delightful.
Sam just wants good things for Frodo, and I appreciate that so dearly. And also, Frodo will not make it through this adventure without Sam.
Mhm.
And I think that's important. Just even if you don't read them as a couple, which there are times where I don't know if I do, but I do read them as a queer platonic relationship.
Yes, absolutely.
And the the power of queer platonic love um, that comes out in this book, in this series, just makes me very happy. Sam
Yeah.
is making little heart shapes with her hands at me through our video chat. Um,
Listen, I don't have to explain myself. Thanks for putting me on blast.
I will always put you on blast, and it will always be with love, my friend. And with that, we are going to cut this here, and next time we'll discuss the next few chapters of the Fellowship of the Ring. So we hope you come along with us on this lovely journey. It's going to get much darker before it gets better, and we're going to weather it together.
Oh,
And
that's very
I'm very
sweet.
excited to see what levity and gay shit and thirst we can bring to this.
The thirst will carry us through the darkness. I'm
The
excited to
thirst
get
will
back
carry us through the darkness.
I'm excited to get back to reading because I started this months and months ago and had to put it down because we were doing a million other things and we decided we were going to do this podcast, and so I stopped reading it so I wouldn't get ahead of myself. But I really want to keep reading Lord of the Rings, so I'm very excited to continue.
Yes, we're gonna keep going through this at a good clip.
Mhm.
So I'm excited to go forward with this. And if you would like to follow along with us as we go through, please subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find us. And actually, I don't know if that's true with where we're currently publishing this, but we'll get there.
Yes.
But you can find our social media. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram and on TikTok at FanAppPod, FanAppPod. Yes, that's 3 P's in a row. I'm sorry. FanAppPod. And that is where we'll pick up next time, I suppose. I don't know, Sammy, do you have anything else for the end of our first real content episode that is now running over an hour long?
No, I'm just excited to keep going. We'll see y'all next time.
Good. Alrighty, see y'all next time. I have to pee so bad.
Okay, go.
The Phantom Apprentice is produced and edited by Ryn and Sam. Our music was composed and performed by James, and our art is by Casey Turgeon. This podcast is created for non-commercial entertainment purposes, and the opinions expressed therein are our own and are not reflective of the opinions of any other person or organization. The content discussed is the property of the Tolkien estate and is used here under fair use.